Hello everyone, in this part we are going to see some of the main steps and keywords that you can meet in production companies, and in particular in animation cinema or cartoon production context. This is a video slightly different than the others as it won't be a technical presentation, but it's a very general introduction of some concepts and keywords that can be useful. First, for you to understand that production studios have their own way of working that may be different from what you can imagine as a scientist or an engineer. Secondly, to give you at least some vocabulary and keywords in case you are going to do an internship or work later on in such companies, as their vocabulary or jargon to describe their work is often different from the scientific and technical one. In this video, I will take example of animation cinema production. Part of what I say can be more or less applied to visual effect production and also in video games. Although these industries have slight differences, typically video game industry are often driven by techniques, so you are usually quite familiar with the vocabulary in use. Visual effects or VFX are often much driven by artist and director intents, but remain with a lot of techniques. And animation cinema is probably the more far-away kind of world, as it's almost entirely driven by artist intents, and techniques is here to answer the best it can to these intents. So first, and the notion at the heart of this industry, is the so-called production pipeline. The production pipeline is how the main steps of the production are going to flow one after the other. One of the main objectives of companies is to have the most efficient pipeline to handle their production from the pre-production to post-production. From far away, production pipelines look all the same, and all companies use very often the main general softwares like Maya, 3D Studio for the 3D modeling and animation, Houdini for VFX, Nuke for compositing, and so on. Actually, in the details, all companies will have a kind of local homemade extensions, specific script to handle their assets, to handle conversion of file formats, the way to work with special effects, and so on. Which make them more or less efficient for different situations, for instance with very large scene, with detailed animation, some may be more focused on visual effects, and they can impact on their style too. But in this video, I'm going to describe only the very common steps. So first, a production is usually split into three big steps. The pre-production, where the story and the way it's going to be displayed is still an ongoing work. The goal in the pre-production is to propose drafts and coarse sketches of the main elements on which decision can be taken, and such that we can iterate quickly on ideas or view style. Pre-production can integrate 3D or be only in 2D, depending on the companies. Then comes the production, where the actual content is made, and finally the post-production, where everything is assembled to generate the final video product. Note that between the original idea at the script level and the final product, some drastic changes can appear, from various constraints and artistic or sometimes technical decisions. And here is an example where you can see an example of a short movie from Pixar, The Blue Umbrella. You have on the left the initial animated storyboard and the final version on the right. The final version is not just a 3D translation on the initial draft, but several modifications have been made, in the timing, of course, but also in the appearance and expressivity of some elements. As some idea can look good and cute on 2D, but they can look odd in 3D with some photorealistic look. And remember, for instance, the notion of uncanny valley. So let us start with the pre-production steps. A story always starts with a script, possibly associated to some concept art, and described visually by the so-called storyboard. So a storyboard consists of a few 2D drawings that express the main elements of the story. Not that until recently storyboards and more generally expressing story was a purely artist-oriented work, and no techniques was involved. Now in the recent years, researchers in computer graphics have started to investigate more and more the notion of storytelling, in order to provide tools that facilitate the creation, the expression, the formalization and analysis of story itself. And actually, storytelling became one of the main scientific goals of Disney Research Studio. I remind that Disney Research is one of the biggest companies that does research and development in computer graphics, and some French research team like Anima team in Grenoble are also focusing on such aspects. Then once the storyboard is set, comes the notion of animatic. Animatic is roughly an animated version of the storyboard that brings the notion of timing. So the animatic can take various formats from sequence of small cartoons, in the case, for instance, of Toy Story 2 here, a simple sequence of drawing, or the storyboarder that simply depicts orally its storyboard. And you can see here an example of Shrek. After the animatic, there is the generation of something called the layout, which can be partly belonging to the pre-production and production, depending on the companies. The role of the layout is to have a better view of the camera placement and to have a correct understanding of the visual field and perspective. So this is one of the steps where big changes can appear between the initial storyboard and the actual movie. Indeed, placing elements in a 3D scene with a given camera adds much more constraint than a set of 2D drawings. In 2D drawings, you can have totally exaggerated or wrong sense of perspective that even jumps between images, while a continuous shot in 3D forces you to have more coherent and accurate proportions with respect to the dimension of the elements. In other words, you cannot cheat as much as on a 2D drawing. And this is what you can see on the example of Monsters University, where you have a huge school beside the character as if it was shot with a very big zoom, while actually embedded in the 3D space with the specified camera, the school appears much smaller beside. Also at this step, you can notice that the characters are only roughly modeled without the expression of the mouse depicted on the storyboard. Actually, the role of the layout is not to look at the details, but to really focus on the placement of the volume in the image. This is why there is no details. It's only very coarse faces and 3D models. The idea is to have a view of the space occupied by the shape, and also to decide at this step if some shape have to be modeled in 3D or can be simply faked more efficiently using 2D elements, typically in the background. Then starts the actual production of the movie content. Not that I haven't talked about the very large step that I call VFX, so the visual effects. Its placement can actually highly depend on the type of company and focus, but we will see that it's a very generic entry that can integrate various elements. So I don't detail it here, as it's very application dependent. The first production part is the 3D modeling, actually generating the detailed version of the 3D shape geometry. In production, modeling relates either to manual polygonal mesh modeling, usually for characters, or the use of parametric modeling, most often based on NURBS, for smooth man-made objects, although parametric modeling is much more developed in CAD industry. In the polygonal mesh modeling, it always follows the same coarse-to-fine approach. First, a low-resolution modeling is generated. The idea is often to take a reference picture and then start from a very simple primitive that is typically extruded along the limbs of the character to match his silhouette and scaled to its proportion. Once this low-res model is achieved, then the model is subdivided and refined to add the details on it. Note that common modeling tools force this coarse-to-fine approach. For instance, you cannot easily fully define a very detailed face and hands, and then merge them with a coarse body, and finally adapt the general morphology of the face afterward. First, you will have issue with joining the meshes with different resolution, and secondly, globally deforming a mesh with details will have a tendency to deform your details in an unnatural way, and everything will become very hard and tedious to correct. Also note that creating the low-res model can look simple, but it's actually not. Not only this can require good artistic skills, but it's a very crucial step, and if something is wrong at this stage, you won't be able to correct it afterwards. You will need to restart a new low-res model. Typically, the topology of your coarse mesh is very important. And you can note that the coarse mesh is mostly made of quadrangle faces and not arbitrary triangulation. One of the reasons is that subdivision and details addition will work very well on nice quadrangulation. It will ease the texture mapping, and more importantly, the main lines of the quadrangle have to be compatible with the animation of the character. If your character will move the legs, for instance, you will need to have a nicely sample line that will align with the deformation you will apply later on. This is why having adapted coarse mesh is so crucial. You could imagine taking an arbitrary scan mesh reconstruction from a camera or laser, and then you will see that your mesh would have a lot of triangles in any direction, possibly with long and fine triangles. And this mesh, they can be okay if you render them in a static configuration, but deforming these meshes and animated will reveal lots of artifacts of the triangulation, and they will be really hard to control. So it's why even if 3D scan objects are available, it's not uncommon for artists to reconstruct by hand a nice coarse mesh on top of it, so that they have the topology they expect. And the softwares that are used to generate these meshes are the standard 3D modeler, such as Maya, 3D Studio Max, Cinema 4D, or it can be Blender too. So this modeling step is really a pure artistic-based process that uses polygonal mesh tools. And this is the basic of the so-called computer graphics artist, or infographist in French, that we shouldn't confound with the technical work of computer graphics scientists that actually develop the technologies used by the artists. Also note that I only describe a manual process for creating individual shape. In several configurations, shapes have to be generated using more automatic procedure. For instance, to generate an entire city or crowd of millions of humans that cannot be individually modeled. But in this case, it's not necessarily called 3D modeling in the production pipeline, but it will be considered as special effect. And typically, procedural modeling that may involve more techniques will in common case be handled by different groups in charge of these special effects, and not necessarily by the computer graphics artist. When going back to the pipeline, now that we have the 3D shape, there is a set of steps that can be performed in parallel. The ringing, the shading, the texturing, and the lighting. I start with the last steps that are all related to the appearance of the model. So the shading is really about setting up the properties of the material. Depending on the tools and renderer, shading can be defined in different manners. In short, it's similar to define your shader in GLSL. But most of the tools offer a dedicated set of language and interface to describe the material. One of the highly used software to finally set your appearance on surface is Substance, developed in France, initially by the company called Allegorithmics and recently acquired by Adobe. The shading process can be more or less technical depending on the needs, and it can vary from a simple setup of pre-made material to really coding dedicated effects similar to what you would do in GLSL in OpenGL. Texturing consists in creating the 2D unwrap map related to the shape and painting these maps. This work is mostly artist-focused as it highly depends on painting skills. Painting on a 2D map can be much more tricky than painting on a 2D sheet it has to correctly take into account the deformation due to the warping. Tools are also proposing more and more methods where artists can also interact directly with the 3D mesh to avoid the need to work with the 2D maps. However, 2D maps are still standard and are very efficient to store and exchange data. Then there is the lighting step, which is a step in itself consisting in setting up the correct lighting environment. Complex scene like this one from the Blue Umbrella short movie can have hundreds of lights and require strong artistic skills. Indeed, lighting provides the general atmosphere of the scene, and comparing different scenes of the same movie can show strong variation in lighting colors and intensity, like warm color for nice scenes and cold greenish one for more tragic scenes. Positioning them to give the right atmosphere and games of shadows requires dedicated skills that are technical but related to lighting effects and highly artistic. Then there is a step I didn't mention previously, which is the matte painting. Matte painting is used when a complex-looking background, like this castle and clouds, is actually only drawn and displayed on a 2D plane. This allows to be much more efficient and have some more freedom than trying to model a fully 3D scene that is only so from far away. Also, it's not restricted to a simple drawing, but several drawings can be mapped onto different surfaces placed at different distances and possibly taking into account some occlusion. So, like that, we have the feeling of seeing some perspective effect when the camera is moving, which makes us think that this is actually 3D. And of course, matte painting is mostly an art-related step. And then there is the rigging step that we often don't know about. And rigging is actually the necessary intermediate step between the modeling of the geometry and its animation. Rigging consists in defining, parameterizing, and attaching deformers and associated interactive handles to the mesh, like the green arrows and cubes on the character, or the blue, red, and yellow and magenta elements on the horse. Each of these handle or controller is associated to a deformation, or in other words, they define the degrees of freedoms of your character deformation. One of the simple forms of rig are the skinning weights, for instance. And in this case, the handles are the joint of the skeleton that we can control in position and rotation. But it can be much more general than that. Rigs often integrate inverse kinematic controllers, typically for the feet and hands. They can integrate controllers for the face, acting themselves on blend shapes. And they can also be arbitrary parametric deformers to model, for instance, flesh motion or hairstyle activated from some dedicated handle. There is currently no generic software that fully handle all these type of rigs using simple interface, mostly because they can involve various deformations parameterized using different approaches and that are very object dependent. And as a result, complete rigs in companies are often encoded as coded scripts that link the handle to the deformation. They are often described in high-level scripting language, such as Python, or using the Mel language in Maya, also using Lua language. These scripts can end up to be very complex, and they can be very different from one company to the other, and they can be part of the homemade specific tools. Companies have often templates of rigs they reuse for multiple shapes with similar characteristics. With that in mind, rigging is actually a very specific task, which requires techniques and coding skills, and the typical profile of people producing rigs are usually a mix of technical background in programming and art. They can be people from digital art school that went toward techniques and programming, or it can be also the opposite with people from computer science background that move toward art. Once the rig is computed, then the animation can be made. And what we mean by animation in production terminology is very specific. It's the generation of the keyframe for a rig shape, usually a character, and the setting of the animation curves on the controller of the rig. And this is it. basically every other type of animation which is not defined by keyframe, like external elements falling under gravity, breaking, exploding, fluids, the clothes that would require simulation, even character hairs that would need to be simulated, would go into the special effect category. But still in animation cinema, almost all characters are keyframed. And this is a very large part of the production. Actually, this animation step can easily become the major part of the studio. And for cartoon production, up to 75% of the artists involved in the production studio can be actually animators, all working in parallel. Making plausible animation is highly time-consuming, and here's an example of a short walking sequence for a coarse character. This video shows its generation, and it's only 1 minute long, but speeded up by a factor of 40, meaning that it looks already 40 minutes. To do only one walking cycle of one low-res character, and clearly the motion of the arm and head remains to be done. So even if keyframe animation is a very specific way to generate animation, it is currently a key element of production studios that plays also a big part of the total cost of the production. To get an idea, a professional animator can do typically 1 to 10 seconds of the final animation shot per day of work. And as we can see on the video, lots of time is actually spent on polishing some details that can be quite a tedious task. This task needs to be done by animators that can be very talented for creation, but they have to spend much time doing very repetitive tasks. And our role as computer graphics scientists and engineers is to propose new solutions to help easing this process of animation. This can be a major changer for computer graphics production and also help animators to work on more creative and interesting tasks and less on technical and repetitive details that could be automatized. I'm also now digging a little bit more into the vocabulary of animator, as this is an animation class. Animator use a specific vocabulary and keywords we don't necessarily know on the technical side. First, there is the notion of posing, in the sense of posing the keyframes. Posing corresponds to setting the general posture of the character. So this is fully linked to the deformation of the character through its rigs, and in the posing step, time is not involved. Then there is the actual animation part related to time. And this animation is itself split into 2 sub-steps, the timing and the spacing. The timing is the actual timestamp associated to the keyframe. So the timing gives the global duration of an action. For instance, the time between 2 collisions of the ball with the floor, or the time of the walking cycle. While the spacing is the speed of the interpolation between the keyframe. So the spacing describes how the dynamic of the action evolves between the keyframe. For instance, for this ball, the spacing must be such that the ball decelerates in vertical direction until reaching its middle position, and then accelerate until reaching the floor. And then I go back to this notion of spatial or visual effect. This steps actually contains everything which is not handled by the traditional modeling, rigging, animation steps. So everything related to physics, the explosion, fluids, dynamics, hairs, clothes, and so on. Things like particle system, modeling complex shapes, generating crowds, and so on. So the visual effect is highly dependent on the project and company, and VFX can be highly technical and scientific. In big production movies, modeling or simulating one element can lead to the development of a totally dedicated system from a team of engineers, with possibly associated research. The main software which is used in visual effects is Houdini from SideFX. It's a software with advanced usage for procedural modeling, simulation, and all kinds of particle-based model and procedural motion. Here are some short examples of visual effects breakdown. I take the case of movies in this case. First, about modeling complex liquids in the movie Battleships. One thing we can note is that although the final shot looks like a single scene, it's actually made with multiple layers. Each layer can consist of a specific simulation or adapted video sequences sometimes only performed in 2D. The splash effect of the water and the spaceship is a fully 3D simulation, and we can see that it uses some particle system for the details. In the case of the movie Gravity, there is not much of real footage, at the exception of the face of the actress. Lots of simulation was used in the movie. The destruction of the spatial station was modeled from lots of rigid bodies and closed simulation as well. Quite often, breaking objects like that consist in pre-splitting the shape into several rigid pieces and then let a rigid body simulation move all the parts. Another thing they did is the study of the spatial suit deformation. The suit was simulated, but finding the good parameters to model the type of deformation and wrinkles of the real material is not easy. So they recorded video of the real suit under different motion, and then they tried to find the best set of simulation parameters that matches the best. One thing we can actually see, if you look carefully, is that the virtual suit has wrinkles that are much more smooth and deep than the real material. And this is typical behavior of standard closed simulation in available software that assume to have very smooth surface and curvature. So after here, there is a scene of Game of Thrones. Here is the real city, and after addition of some main building in the front, and the background which is totally virtual. And actually the population crowd itself is a visual effect. And finally, it's a sequence of Elysium, where here the entire world is procedurally generated. They basically build a set of possible elements, such as trees and houses, with different variations, and then populated more or less procedurally the world with them. Going back to the pipeline, we have the final steps of rendering, and then we reach the post-production steps, with in particular the compositing step. As we already saw, 3D scenes are not directly made and rendered in a single unique image, but they are made of lots of layers that are assembled together. This is true for visual effects, but it's also often true in animation cinema too. Each element is individually rendered separately, and we render not only the color image, so the RGB component, but we also export the depth component and the normal component on separated images. Then these layers can be reused afterwards to slightly touch, polish, or modify each layer separately, like changing the color, changing the shadow, and so on, without having to redo and re-render the entire scene. Compositing is the step where all these layers are merged together, and the main software used for this is Nuke. As you can see on these examples, movie can be made of very high number of layers. Here we can see the orientation of the normals, for instance, that help to adjust the illumination. Actually, in big productions, the level of detail that is targeted can be extremely high, and actually much higher than what you can visually see in the shot sometimes. So in this case, the sharks are fully modeled in 3D, but we can hardly see the silhouette in the video. Here's an example of the layers in Game of Thrones. This is actually a fake boat and a fake castle. And even the vegetation is brought in using layers. And here's an example of the extreme precision of some scene. These two actors are recorded on green screen. then incrustated very far away and in the dark on a boat. Finally, several layers of fogs are added, plus a blur effect of the camera field of view. So it would be probably quite hard to distinguish the actor at the end. And this is it for the compositing. Actually, the last step of the pipeline is the editing, that is the final montage of the video, adapting the cuts, integrating the sounds, the music, and so on. And this is the end of the pipeline. And now I will finish with a zoom on the common principles that artists, animators follow when creating expressive animation, typically for cartoon. We are actually used to see this principle, but the first time we actually look at them carefully, then they may look strange, as they are not necessarily depending on physical laws. They even often break them intentionally. So first, there is the important notion of called the line of action, that is used when drawing a character performing an action. If you look at artists drawing animated character, you will notice that they often start by drawing a central curve and then draw the character around it. This central curve acts as a backbone for the entire character and immediately shows a notion of the main motion. This line of action is a kind of medial axis that mostly helps to express in a coherent way the pose of the character. From this curve, you can infer if the character is in dynamic or not. A straight curve will give the feeling that the character is static and in equilibrium, while increasing the curvature of this line of action will give the feeling of an unstable pose and therefore a dynamic one. Thanks to this line, we have insight of the dynamic even from a static image. Note that the increase of curvature also accentuates the effect itself in exaggerating the feeling of weight or the sadness of the character. And of course, these silhouettes are highly exaggerated compared to a real character, but it looks okay to our human view. We understand it. And this exaggeration even helps us to apprehend the motion more clearly. And this leads us to the so-called principle of animation. As a scientist, we could think that the best possible animation is to reach for photorealistic poses and then interpolate between these poses, but this is actually not well adapted for expressive animation. You can see on the left a direct simple interpolation between poses. Although the animation is smooth and the character is cartoony, the motion looks robotic. It lacks some live-like details. And now on the right, we can see a much more expressive animation with very subtle changes that also makes the animation look more lively. Small changes in the speed, in the acceleration, deceleration, in the in-betweens, oscillation of some parts like the hair, and so on. And actually, animators are following some general rules called the 12 principles of animation. These principles were described by Disney in their books The Illusion of Life in 1981 that are applied in 2D and 3D animation. The principles are the following: timing and spacing, that we already saw, slow in and slow out, which is related to spacing. As we saw on the animation, the speed of motion is not uniform in the motion. There is an acceleration and deceleration part in the beginning and at the end. Then there is squash and stretch. This is actually a very common effect in cartoon that use deformation of shape to highlight a motion. Here, the blue sphere stretches when it reaches high speed, or the body of the face can also stretch to accentuate some effect. This is totally unrealistic deformation. Characters shouldn't be elastic like that. But, and surprisingly somehow, it's kind of plausible, as it helps people to better understand the dynamic of the scene, even on static images. Then the fifth principle of animation is anticipation. Here it consists in saying that motion doesn't immediately start from nothing, but it has to be anticipated. And the faster or more dynamic the motion is, the more the anticipation has to be exaggerated, like storing some energy before releasing it. Once again, this level of anticipation is totally unrealistic. Nobody really starts like that before running. But for our human point of view, it brings some insight about what is the amount of energy that will be deployed in the motion to come. Then the 6th and 7th principle are the notion of follow-through and secondary action. These are notions related to secondary kind of elements, like hairs that follows the main motion, but are not at the origin of it. These elements are also moving, mostly due to contacts and inertia from a physics point of view. They should be guided, but not be rigidly attached to the main motion, otherwise everything would look like a rigid block. So they should be delayed and have their own frequency. Of course, the motion of such elements should continue during a small amount of time when the characters stop. This is the follow-through principle. And all these elements have their own local dynamic depending on their material, constraints and inertia, and this is the notion of secondary action. Finally, the rest of the notion are the exaggeration principle that we saw in all the examples. The notion of appeal, to remind that the scene should look pleasant to watch at the end. The notion of arc, stating that motion of lively creature should never follow straight line in space, but they are always curves. Then the notion of staging, reminding that the audience should have their attention guided by the main action. The animation is a show, and the way we place the camera and the action should be guided by which story we want to explain. And finally, the notion of straight ahead versus pose to pose, which are the main ways to handle your keyframes. Either you build it continuously, one pose after the other, checking that every interpolation is fine along the way. This is the straight ahead. While pose to pose consists in defining all your extreme pose first, and then you refine iteratively the in-betweens. So as you can notice, these principles are sometimes very general notions. They don't describe algorithm or procedure to follow by themselves, and there is a large range of possible interpretation. Some principles are fully depending on artistic choices. But we can note at the end that actually some research works in animation have been focused and are still trying to help implementing such of these principles when animating virtual content.